Peace. A noon, nine, Nupu. Let's speak on it. This is Dane Calloway. I want to play a little bit of his video, and then I want to get to business on the belief that Black Americans, right, Negroes, are the original American Indians in America and were Indians before the colonizer came in. Now you know the Indians wasn't called Indians before the colonizer came in here, came into America. So how could Black Americans, right, be originally American Indians? What were you before the American colonizer came in here? And why don't you identify with said tribe? Okay. Let's take a listen to a little bit of Dane Calloway's philosophy.
On this, and I also greatly respect your position, Mr. Chairman, that the legislative process is not the ideal way to determine the legitimacy of Native American tribes. But our point is
that's another thing. Hold on. In my segments, I also mentioned that he's using the term Native American because that's they feel like that's the political correctness term to utilize at this time. So what he was referring to though were the American Indians. The Native Americans didn't go through this. The American Indians went through this. Okay, but yeah, you'll get it.
Uniqueness here with these Virginia tribes. First of all, most Native American tribes gained their recognition when they signed an agreement with the United States government. And when they signed these peace treaties, that established their legitimacy. These tribes signed their peace treaties with the King of England. The principal one was in 1677 with Charles II. It's been recognized for 332 years, both in Virginia and in England. So there's a uniqueness because they date all the way back, as both the governor and senator have said, to when the English settlers arrived on the shores of Virginia. We were hoping we could get this done by the 400th anniversary of James.
He said that these Native Americans, and Dane Calloway corrected it and said American Indians. The white guy said, whoever this is on the Indian Affairs Committee, said that the Indians go back to when the colonizer comes in here. When the colonizer came. Right? So, how can you be ancient? How can you be original? How can you be prime and consider yourself an Indian? And I want to touch on that as well. Because the truth of the matter, if you're doing proper research, Black people in America, Negroes, Black Americans, never stood up collectively and said, we're willing to protest because we're American Indians. Okay? This is a new wave, right? Black people never called themselves American Indians. When they say, oh, my grandmother said we was Indians. Well, you know, your mother or your father wouldn't have came without your grandmother having a husband, which would be your grandfather. Now you got to peer deep into that thinking when only the grandmother states it. And I'm not saying that what one's grandmother is saying they are is not the truth. The question is, and the bewilderment is, how are Black Americans, if they have no connection to Africa, they have no genetic DNA ties to Africa, how are they originally American Indians? You've seen it yourself. The white guy in the caption in the video, I guess he's dealing with Indian affairs. He's on the Indian Affairs Committee, said that the American Indian goes back to when the colonizer came in here. But Dane Calloway wants you to overlook that. So let's look at some terms and let's reflect upon the fact that the first eumelaninite Homo sapiens on the planet were not Indians. In fact, the original people on this planet predate that term. Why do I say that? Well, first, let's look at the etymology. And we want to place Indian in here. Now, my people, we understand the definitions and the etymologies. We know the etymology is dealing with the origin of words, right? But you gotta peep out the dates as well. The data really let you know when something was called something, or something was named something, or the definition was changed by way of language. You understand what I'm saying? So let's look at the definition of Indian, which apparently was a noun, an adjective first, right? Was an adjective first, and then a noun. I think that's the setup like that. Circa 1300s. Now, you know a time that you're dealing with when India, Hindustan, Bharat was becoming to be known as India? Well, you got to go back to the Marco Polo times. Okay. There's a good series on Netflix. It's called Marco Polo. Whether the complete information is true in the series, you can leave it up to yourself to break that down. But it's a good series on the travels of Marco Polo. You know, he traveled through Asia. But you got to think about Alexander the Great. But in the 1300s, you're dealing with the times of Marco Polo. Okay. Now, there's derivatives of India that go back to the Greek and the Latin. But when you get to the 1300s, you're getting close to the times of, or the creation of English, right? So Indian, firstly connected to people of South Asia and India. But it was called Bharat and Hindustan first. That is correct. Okay, the original inhabitants of India maybe didn't call India India, but we do know it's a Greek or Roman, Latin, English term. Okay. And we do know that the 1300s, right? In the 1300s and in the time of Herodotus, the term Indian wasn't being applied to what will become known as Indians in America. If you follow the definition and the etymology and the usage origin applied in English to the Aboriginal native inhabitants, this is letting you know that it's not really even an English term. It may be more of a Portuguese, Spanish, Latin term, right? But it was applied in English to the Aboriginal native inhabitants of the Americas from at least 1553, reflecting 1610s as an adjective, reflecting Spanish and Portuguese use, on the mistaken notion that America was the eastern end of Asia. What is that telling you? I got a map of Herodotus. Okay. Herodotus would have known about the term Indian or India or Indios. Okay. You see, they would be located in the bottom of Europe. They thought America was at the eastern end of Asia. So that would let you know which way they were traveling at that particular time. All right, you got to look into Alexander the Great. Will Black Americans originally be American Indians before the colonizer came in? Here's another thing you got to look at on this map: Libya. Okay, but let's get back to the definition. So when you see Indian, all you do is take that N out, right? The N is for 9, because we get into the facts, not the emotions. The Indian subcontinent, Central Asia. All right, we know these definitions. Old English language, Latin, Greek. Okay, so the Greeks knew about India. All right, the Greeks used the term Indos. So at this time, you mean to tell me that the people in America, in the creation and the usage of this term, applying it to the Indian subcontinent, were called Indian. It's bullshit. But Hindu, like in Hindustan, is Persian. Okay, and you can still see the Persian influence because there are people in India still that relate to the term Hindu. That's Persian. Sanskrit. Let's look that up. Sanskrit is an ancient Indo-Aryan, primarily liturgical language of Hinduism, Buddhism, and Jainism, originating in South Asia over 3,500 years ago. Okay. It's the primary language of Hindu scripture, right? And the origin and structure as an Indo-European language, it is related to Latin, Greek, and modern Indo-Aryan languages. It was largely standardized by the grammarian Panini. Okay, so this is an Sanskrit is an Indo-European language, apart, connected. It's not ancient. Okay. So when you see Sanskrit here, you know this is all of these languages have a connection to them. So the people would have a connection as well. Right? And so the American Indian and American, does this race of people in America really have woolly hair, or do they have straight hair? The prime hair texture in India is straight black hair. And at this time, the American Indian, the people in America, wouldn't have called themselves Indian. So when you say American, the black Americans are American Indians, you can't do nothing with that, because that would mean all black Americans are a part of one tribe, the same tribe. And that's not correct. And then there's no facts or truths to the different tribes in America, right, all having woolly hair. Was there diversity in America? Okay, the straight-haired Eskimo types came in later on. Then what are the original nappy-headed American, indigenous American tribes in America? And when you go back and research, it says that these are the original woolly-haired people. These tribes are connected to the original woolly-haired Negro people in America. Where does it state that? You got that science on Africa. Okay, so we got Indian. Dane Calloway said we are American Indian. Now, here's a breakdown on Hindustan. Okay. The term originates from the Persian sound, where the Sanskrit S became H. So the Sanskrit is Sindhu. So you can see where the India came from. So how could the black American, in the case of description, origination of the term and word, how could black Americans predate the Hindu when you say you're an American Indian? Can we not see that? If the original term for Indian and the breakdown of Indian going back to Sindhu and Hindu is not applied firstly to the Americas, then how can you prove that you originate before these people, these dark-skinned people with the straight hair, using the same term that was applied to them? Make it make sense. We're going to listen to it again.
But our point
Oh,
is there
that's
really-
another thing. Hold on. In my segments, I also mentioned that he's using the term Native American because that's they feel like that's the political correctness term to utilize at this time. So what he was referring to though were the American Indians. The Native Americans didn't go through this. The American Indians went through this. Okay, but yeah, you.
So I just wanted to make sure that he's saying American Indians. Okay. Which one is it? Then you start to go into Walter Plecker. Okay. We see that Indian is a Greek term. So when did Herodotus exist? Herodotus spoke about people on the west and the east sides of the world. Some say he was talking also about the Americas. Okay. There's other breakdowns about his context on Ethiopia. Herodotus wrote in his histories 440 BC. You want to know what? This is interesting. Because Indians don't even exist at this time. If you're going with the 1300 definition of Indian, you see, circa 1300, inhabit of India, this term Indian don't exist. India does. So you know what else doesn't exist? America, according to Herodotus. But you know who do exist at this time? Without a question, Black people. At this time, no one knows if even America or South America exists. And this is the information that we would like from the indigenous inhabitants of America. Is recorded historical information regarding Negroes in America, science, footprints, fossils, in collective, hieroglyphics, in America, North America. That predate the colonizer, or that's written by Black American authors. Strictly on the origin, the creation, right? The diversity, the genetic structure of the American Indian, who was the Black American, misnomer Negro. It says in his work, Herodotus, right, there was two distinct groups of Ethiopians, the Eastern Asian and the Western Libyan African. In his work, 440 BC, he described the Eastern Ethiopians as having straight hair. So that's what I mean when you look at the term India. You might find some woolly hair there, but that's not the area where the origination of woolly hair begins. So Herodotus said, them Asians got straight hair. and the Western Ethiopians have curly hair. Okay, this is identified at least by 479 BC. Herodotus mentions this distinction, noting that Easterners were part of the Indian continent, while the Westerners were a part of the Libyan contingent. This is the contingent talking about the army, but the term Ethiopian were for the peoples living at the edge of the known world, specifically differentiating those in Africa and those serving with Asian forces. So that lets you know diversity in Africa. But the Ethiopians are way at the bottom. And then when you read Herodotus and the Greeks, the Ethiopians are attributed with having the most intelligence. They are considered the most beautiful. Right? And if you look at the race of Ethiopians today, they're all not like the light-skinned Ethiopians that you commonly know an Ethiopian to be. There's very dark-skinned Ethiopians as well, along with Somalians, Eritreans. Okay. You would think all the Ethiopians look like Nipsey Hussle, look like his brother Sam. So according to the map, they considered Libya, if you want to look at it, right? All of Africa was considered Libya at one time. Like all of Africa was considered Ethiopia at one time. Like all of Africa was considered to be Sudan at one time. Like all of Africa was considered to be Nubia at one time, right? All of Africa was known to be called Kemet at one time. And then after the white man came, the Greek people, what was Africa called then? It was called Africa, right? But what was Libya called? Ancient name for the northern part of Africa west of Egypt, attested in hieroglyphics from 2000 BC. Okay, the Greeks talking about it in 440 BC. And the dates is important. Of unknown origin, in Greek use though, sometimes meaning all of Africa. Okay, and then you got the Italians. Let's do Ethiopia or Ethiopian, right? It's a Greek term, but the definition says inhabitant of Ethiopia. All right. And it goes down to let you know that they're sun worshipers. No definition, the Indian definition, the Libyan definition didn't say anything about their practices, but the definition here says sun worshiper. Okay, let's back it up and go Ethiopia. Remember, how are you American Indian before you colonized? The colonizer came in. Now this Ethiopia is how you dig into it. Is right here. Right. Ethiop. Sun worshiper, right? Ethiopian, Negro. Okay. Negro, but you say the misnomer Negro, American Indian misnomer Negro. And you originally American Indian though. Then how can you be a Negro? But you need to know Negroes are woolly haired people and people, dark skinned people with straight hair. Who are the black Americans? Woolly haired people or dark skinned people with straight black hair? Ethiopian here, synonymous with Negro, 14th century. But Ethiopian got to go way back more than that, because it says who the Homeric Ethiopians were is a matter of doubt. The poet elsewhere speaks of two divisions of them, just like Herodotus, right? One dwelling near the rising, the other near the setting of the sun, both having embrowned visages from their proximity to that of luminary, there's the suns, and both leading a blissful existence. Okay. Because living amid a flood of light and as natural concomitant of a blissful existence, blameless and pure and free from every kind of moral defilement. This is from Charles Anthon, note to the first 6 books of Homer, Iliad. This is 1878. Herodotus wrote about him too. But when you think about the Homeric breakdown, okay, he said from the west of the sun, near the rising of the sun, that's both sides of the world. So how are you American Indian before the colonizer came in? 1300s, the term Indian didn't even exist. India did. Ethiop. All right. I wanna let's see. Yeah. So think about it. Could the black Americans could the black Americans really be the original American Indians? Did the colonizers in America call the inhabitants Indian? AI overview. Yes. 1492. Christopher Columbus. East Indies. Spanish, Portuguese, English. So you're not even saying you original when you say you're an American Indian. Columbus referred to the native peoples as Indios. Some people be like Indios, they God or something like that. It's still a Spanish term, a Latin term, a Roman term, an Indo-European term, or Indians, because he mistakenly, this is what's in history. You can't change the history, my nigga. He mistakenly believed his westward journey from Spain had landed in the Indian Ocean. There is no historical there is no historical information out there in America, none, that states that black Negroes were in America who are the American Indians before the colonizer came in. And if this comes down, like they said, legislation can't deal with it, but in order to be a American Indian, right, to change your information, your status, that's legislative, that's political, right? That has to do with politics. You gotta prove that you're American Indian. Some of y'all got Negro on your birth certificate. You can say misnomer Negro, okay, but it mean American Indian, but it don't when you say Negro, because a Negro don't mean American Indian. not when you're dealing with the paperwork. You dig what I'm saying? Negro and American Indian is not the same on paperwork. If your license or your birth certificate or anything says American Indian, that does not mean American Indian. Whether you say Walter Plecker misnomered the original people, Negro, and they're American Indians. Okay. When he did it, you was a Negro, and you've been a Negro ever since. Nobody changed it in your family. But even in that, when you say Walter Plecker misnomered a gang of American Indians, individually, you have to prove that happened to you. You can't just say it. You don't think if you getting paperwork on yourself, government paperwork, and whatever your family left around, don't you think the government has it? Yeah, so what would be the problem with you identifying now today as an American Indian? And how many of you by paperwork say, or how many of you by paperwork, your nationality states you're a Negro? Now look at Ethiopia. Okay. This term was being used in BC. There's also a map of Africa with Negro land on it. But when you put Negro in here, we know that's a Spanish Portuguese term. We just seen that the Indian, right, is a Spanish Portuguese term. So I think they knew the difference between an Indian and a Negro, because a Negro, even though Ethiopia is connected to Negro by the Greeks, it means a member of a black-skinned race of Africa. Oh, white people are from Africa. Yeah, but they not Negroes. They're not the original Negroes. It's from Spanish and Portuguese, used for the term black, Negrum, Nigeria. Okay. And then you go on to get these negative terms they want to apply to it, right? Okay. They won't put the negative terms on there. You know why they put the negative terms in there. Back then, man, there wasn't no lights in Africa. Okay. There wasn't no lights in Africa. Shit, there wasn't no lights in America. But in America, I don't think it was no dark skinned, woolly head niggas that look like Africans coming out of the jungles of North America. The Latin word also is applied to the black peoples of Africa, but the usual terms were Ethiops and Afar. Okay. This is the definition. But we can go way back with Herodotus. And it's not telling you the origin of the Ethiopians. We know the origin of the American Indian. Like my man said, the white guy said, he said it go back to the colonizer. That's when they started to exist, when the colonizer came. What's the information that predates that Negroes, black Americans are the original American Indians in America, that predates when the colonizer came in there? And then we can be like, oh, okay. Anything after the colonizer, dates and times and things of that nature, we got to be like, oh, no. There was some straight hair people in here called American Indians as well, labeled dark skin. So you got to go past the colonizer. So do you really think the Black Americans should really be called American Indians? Do all Black Americans in America identify with American Indian and that they are the American Indians that have no genetic DNA, melanin connection, culture and cultivation to the motherland? A new nine new poop. Y'all hold it down until next time. Peace.